So, show of hands, who here is in a relationship or has been in a relationship? Okay, out of those relationships, how many of them have been with a civilian? So, it's pretty difficult to communicate with your civilian significant other because from time to time, there's some frustrating things that we go through here at the academy that stress us out that they're never really going to understand. Because they're taking 12 hours at a state school while we're here, and how are we supposed to explain to them the 3 GRs, the 2 papers, and the silver weekend that we have lying ahead of us, and for them to understand? Before they can even sympathize with us, they're asking, what's a GR? It's just incredibly frustrating. These emotions that we feel, whether they're civilian, significant other, are pretty similar to Conrad's, but on a much smaller scale. Conrad was the character created by Roxana Robinson in her novel Sparta, who suffers from PTSD. He has a relationship with a civilian girlfriend, Claire, and the PTSD that he goes through really puts a serious strain on their entire connection throughout the entirety of the novel. According to experts, about 11 to 20% of veterans from the Iraq and Afghanistan wars suffer from PTSD. This number could be higher since a lot of veterans have an aversion to admitting and seeking help for their PTSD because they're fearful that it will have a negative impact on their careers. The negative impacts that they are worried about is being viewed as being weak by their counterparts, and they feel that this could negatively affect promotion chances. It is also said that pride gets in the way of them going and seeking attention. In Sparta, we saw that Conrad took the initial steps to get medical attention for his PTSD, but he never actually made the appointment because he was very prideful. He even expressed saying, "Pride was the prize for never admitting to these feelings, the award for holding the mission above yourself. Pride was the prize for loyalty. Shame was the punishment for breaking trust." So imagine, you break your leg when you're running with your squadron here on a silver weekend, but you don't go to the doctors because you don't want to be that guy that had to follow the formation and feel ashamed of yourself. PTSD is as severe as breaking a leg or hurting your ankle while running. Even though it's not physical, it's emotional, and no one else can see it, you are still suffering just as much as a physical injury. It's unfathomable that people will not get medical attention for something like this, but it is still a real problem here in our United States military. Many officers and even enlisted people are being noted too proud for getting medical attention, and they end up committing suicide because they're at a loss of knowing how to cope with this problem. If they do not commit suicide, a lot of them turn violent with their families or even turn to alcohol and drugs as another coping mechanism. Part of learning how to cope with PTSD is recognizing your symptoms. One of Conrad's symptoms that he struggled with was his sexual relationship with his girlfriend, Claire. So when Conrad and Claire were in college, they had a healthy sexual relationship. They felt very comforted by each other, and they were both very physical people. Upon his departure for his first tour of duty, there was an emotional chasm that was created because of the distance, which people who have had civilian relationships can all understand, unless your girlfriend or boyfriend lives here in town with you. When he came back, the only thing they had that was left as their connection was the sex itself. So when they were having sex, he looked down and realized that she was crying. He had become violent with her in something that was supposed to be extremely intimate and special for a couple such as themselves. But Conrad's behavior in this instance was not unusual. Many survivors who suffer from PTSD are known to have an emotional numbness to them. Conrad's emotional numbness made him not realize that he was acting violently towards Claire, and this pushed her away even more than she had already been in the first place when he would come back. Veterans with PTSD get divorced twice as much as veterans who do not have PTSD. Their chances for getting divorced more than twice go up by 3 times, and their relationships tend to last significantly shorter than others. Many of the PTSD survivors' partners also feel the effects of the PTSD from the veteran. They always feel like they're on the verge of a nervous breakdown. And we see this with Claire a lot when every time we have a really bad sexual encounter, she always physically removes herself from her side of the bed with him and cries and asks not to be touched. As the emotional side of their sexual life plummets, the physical side goes down as well. Conrad struggles with impotence throughout their relationship, And as he tries to be involved with Claire in their intimate moments, he cannot seem to really be connected with her. In a clinical study, 90% of veterans who suffered from PTSD from the Iraq and Afghanistan wars struggle with impotence. PTSD survivors have struggles with anxiety, and anxious arousal really gets in the way of them being stimulated sexually. Claire and Conrad attempt to make moves at making the relationship better, but Claire continues to cry, and she becomes more and more dependent on him for the sake of him getting better. This is something called This is something called the caregiver burden, where she feels she needs to be with him in order for him to be better, despite her own happiness. Ultimately, Claire and Conrad do not make it as a couple, which is not uncommon among the survivors. What was once a blossoming love between two intellectuals has been shattered by the reality of war and all the psychological damage it does to military members. This is exactly the message that Robinson was trying to convey.